In this lesson, we will use the Move tool, which is one of our modify commands. Inside the Move Revit file, open the interior door head detail from under drafting views in the project browser. By double-clicking on interior door head detail, it'll open up that drafting view. On the left-hand side, we can see the door head detail the way it will look when it's completed. On the right side, we have parts that create the door head detail, but we need to use our editing tools to fix the detail. For this lesson, we will learn how to use the Move tool to move certain parts into place. Start by moving your cursor down toward the right-hand side and clicking on the break line. When the break line is highlighted, move your cursor up until you see what looks like 4 different little arrows. When you see those 4 arrows, click, hold your mouse button down, and drag the break symbol up until it's in line with the other break symbol over on the left-hand side. Then let go. Those 4 arrows that we saw while using this kind of move command indicate the move command, which we can find underneath Modify up on the ribbon. This is the easiest way to move an object. Click on it and then drag it into the appropriate location. But it has a couple of different drawbacks. One is that it makes it a little bit harder to move multiple objects. You still can, but it's a little harder. The second thing, and the reason why we tend to use the Move command on the ribbon a little bit more often, is because you can specify dimensions when you use the Move command. An example of that would be to move your cursor over and select on this piece of chipboard that's going straight up and down on the side. If we select on the chipboard, move your cursor up, then select on Move. We can then pick a base point, start to move over in a direction. When you move over in that direction, you will get what's called a temporary dimension. When you see that temporary dimension, you can type in a dimension, such as 2 inches. Then hit Enter on your keyboard. By doing that, it will move that 2 inches in the direction of that temporary dimension. In this case, it's moved that board over to the correct location. And we can see this board is the same as this board over on the left-hand side. The next thing I would like to do is move the lines that we see here and here over so that they're lined up just to the right of that board that we just moved. These 2 lines are the same 2 lines that we can see here and here with the dash line. To do that, you can click over here to the right-hand side, hold your mouse button down, and you will create a box, and it will look like a dash box. This is called a crossing window. When you see a crossing window, it means that anything that's touching this box will get selected. If you'd selected on the other side of the line and then moved over to the lines, your box would have looked like this. This is a regular window, and all of your lines would need to have been inside of this box in order to pick the lines. So it made more sense to click over to the right-hand side, move to the left, because all we needed to do was touch these lines with the box to execute the Move command. You can now let go. These 2 lines will now be selected. You can zoom in by spinning the wheel on your mouse. Now move up here and select on Move. For a base point, it's not necessary, but I like to select directly on the line because it gives me more control as to where I can move on the screen. Click once on the line. Now move over in this direction. Once you get right with this line right here, it'll go straight over. Click, and now those lines have both moved over that dimension from the right-hand side over to the left-hand side. And if you zoom out, you can now see that those lines are now in place. So by using the Move command, you have 2 different features that you can use. One is selecting directly on the object, gripping onto it, and just moving it to the location that that object needs to be moved to. The other way is to select on one object or on multiple objects, then specify the dimension that you need. Those objects that you have selected will move that direction for the dimension that you specified. The Copy command allows us to make a copy of an object or a group of objects from one specific location to a second specific location. To do this, move your cursor into the drawing area and click somewhere in the white area. After clicking in the white area, spin the wheel on your mouse to zoom in. You will notice that the detail on the left, which is the way that our detail should look when it's completed, has gypboard on the left-hand side and on the right-hand side. We need our detail on the right to have that same condition. Move your cursor over and select on the gypboard. After left-clicking on the gypboard, it will highlight blue. Move your cursor up and select on the copy command. Move your cursor back over to the right, and on the right-hand face of the gypboard, click. Move over toward the right-hand side. At this point, if you know the exact dimension that your copy needs to be made, you could type in the dimension and it will make a copy, in this case from the left over to the right-hand side. The copy will be made in the direction that you're moving your mouse. In this case, I don't know the exact dimension, so we will just move this gypboard over until we are lined up with the detail over toward the right-hand side, then click to place that gypboard in. Hit escape a couple of times on the keyboard to get out of the command. If we needed to copy multiple objects, we could have done the same thing. You would move your cursor over toward the objects that you need to copy, click over toward the right-hand side of those objects, hold your mouse button down, and do a crossing window across each of the objects you want to copy. When you would have let go of the mouse button, it would have highlighted all the objects that you had selected. Then you could have used the copy command and copied all those objects over the same way that we copied the one piece of gyp from the left to the right. In this lesson, we'll learn how to use the rotate command. On the left-hand side, we have the completed detail. And in this detail, we see the break line going across the top of our object. On the right-hand side, we can see a break line, but it's going 90 degrees in the other direction from where it needs to be. To rotate this object around, we have several different methods that we could use. Start off by clicking on the break line. Then, up on the ribbon, select on the rotate command. The first thing that we could do is type 90 here where it says angle on the options bar. 90, enter, and we can see it rotate around. The second thing that we could have done was manually rotate this. So with the object still highlighted, click on Rotate, move this line straight down, click once, move in a direction that you want your object to rotate. Now you can either click again to finish the rotation, or in this case we can see that I have a 45-degree angle. When you see that degree angle symbol, you can type in the angle that you want, and it will rotate that object around, in this case, 90 degrees. Another way that we could have rotated was by selecting on the object, coming up to rotate, then changing the center of the rotation. To do this, after the rotate command has been executed, you will see that there's a little dot there in the center of your rotation. If you click and hold your mouse button down, you can then drag that rotation spot up to the endpoint of one of your break lines. Go straight down, click, then do a rotation. And now we can see that the center of that rotation has now been moved from the center of the break line to one of the endpoints of the break line. And this would have worked with multiple objects as well. Select multiple objects, use the rotate command, pick that center point of the rotation, drag it to where you need your rotation to take place at, let go, then spin your objects around until they're at the appropriate angle, in this case 90 degrees, click, then your object will be at the correct angle at the correct location. From here, we need to use the move command to put it in its final place. Move your cursor up. When you see what looks like the move symbol, click, and now drag this object down until it's lined up with the break line over on the left-hand side. Let go, then click out here in space to finish up the command. In this lesson, we will learn how to use a linear array. In the detail on the right-hand side, move your cursor over, click somewhere in the blank drawing area, then spin the wheel on the mouse. Down in this area of the detail, move your cursor up and highlight on the channel. If for some reason you can't see the channel, then underneath the View tab, select on thin lines. So you would select on thin lines, and then you should be able to see that metal channel down here at the bottom. Click on the channel. Now we'll use the array command to make copies of this object, in this case, straight up. So to do this, I'm zooming out so that I can see things a little better, and I zoomed out by just spinning the wheel on the mouse. Now I will move my cursor up and select on the array command. There are actually two different kinds of arrays that we can use. One is called linear, and the other is called radial. Linear does an array in a straight line. Radial either does an array around an arc or in a complete circle. For this example, though, I want to do an array that's a straight line. For the number, that's how many of these objects need to exist. 2 is fine. And we have options here called move to second and move to last. For now, just leave it on second. Zoom in here toward the bottom and click at this intersection point. Zoom back out. Now move in the direction that we want the array to take place. I would like to make a copy of this channel and have it sit on top of this object up here. To do that, we'll come straight up, and then when you see 4 inches, click. Now it's made a copy of this object 4 inches straight up. If we zoom in, we can now see that this object is sitting in the proper location, but it's actually a little bit lower than what we'd like. So to adjust that, we can click on the object, click and hold down the mouse button. It will look like the move symbol shows up, then move the mouse up until the object is just above this other piece of steel. Zoom back out, and now we can see that we have a copy here, as well as a copy down below. If you look very closely, you'll see a couple of lines over toward the side, and if you zoom way out, you will then see that there's a number associated with it. If you click where that number is at and type in another number, such as 4, you can see that it will continue this array, evenly spacing between the first spot that you had clicked to the same distance as the second spot that you clicked. If you change this to be a 3, click out into the drawing area, or a 5, it will continue to multiply or subtract based on the number that you type in there on the side. This same step would have worked if we had selected last on the options bar instead of second. The only difference would have been, for the spacing, it would have spaced them evenly between the first spot and the second spot that we picked, as opposed to the same distance as the first spot and the second spot that we had picked. For this example, though, we only need 2 of them, so we can change that number to be 2. You can click on the object, zoom out until you see the number, click where it has the number, change that to 2, then click out here and space again, then zoom back in. Now, if you no longer want to have that physical relationship between the first object and the second object, you can select on the object that you made the copy of, then come up here to ungroup, and now that relationship will no longer take place. You will no longer be able to array them, make multiple ones based off of that first array that you did. If you click out here in the drawing area and zoom back, you can now see that we have 2 of them, an object here, just like the other detail has an object here and an object here. You also could have used the copy command, selected on the one object, copied it up, but for this instance we just chose to use the array command. In this lesson, we will learn how to use the mirror command. On the left-hand side, we have the finished detail, and that's the way that this detail on the right should look when it's completed. If we look down here toward the bottom, and we can zoom in by spinning the wheel on the mouse, we can see that we have a C channel and then another C channel. And that's a condition that we need to have over on the right-hand side. To do this, we will use the mirror command. Start by selecting on the C channel, then move your cursor up, and there are actually 2 different kinds of mirror commands available to us. The first one won't actually be the correct mirror command for this condition, but I do want to illustrate it for you. And that's the Mirror Pick Axis tool. Select on Mirror Pick Axis, move your cursor over. On the outer face of this C channel, click, That outer face became the axis point for that mirror, and we can see that it's made an exact copy of that object over on the other side. Unfortunately, though, it's not spaced appropriately. If you look over on the left-hand side, we can see that there's a nice gap between these two. At this point, if we wanted to use the move command, we could. But for this example, I would like to use the other kind of mirror command to correctly mirror this to the other side. If it's not already highlighted, make sure to select on that channel that we just made, then click the delete key on the keyboard to get rid of it. Now, let's try the other mirror command. Once again, select on that channel, move your cursor up, and now let's select on Mirror Draw Axis. Zoom in here toward the bottom by just spinning the wheel on your mouse. Then along the face of this channel that goes across the bottom, move your cursor along until you see that triangular shape there in the middle of the object. Once it's there, click and draw a line straight up. This means that we'll mirror across this line that we're drawing straight up. Click again once you have this dashed line going up, and we can see it's mirrored it equally from one side over to the other side. And if we zoom out, we can now see that that object has in fact been mirrored from the left over to the right. The trim and extend commands in Revit give us a variety of different kinds of functionality. To see this, click in the drawing area, then spin the wheel on your mouse to zoom in toward the lower right-hand side of this detail view. Select on the line that's going straight across, click and hold down on it, and drag it down until it's crossing over these two lines. Then click out here in the drawing area. Select on the line toward the right-hand side that's going straight up, move your cursor up, and now select on Trim Extend to Corner. There are actually 3 different buttons: Trim Extend the Corner, Trim Extend Single Element, and Trim Extend Multiple Elements, which we will discuss. So select Trim Extend the Corner, pick the lower half of the line, then pick the side of the line that's going across that you want to keep. By doing this, it brings them to a corner, just like the image on the button. The next option over is Trim Extend Single Element. Hit Escape on the keyboard a couple of times to get out of the command. Select on the line that's going straight across. Move up to Trim Extend Single Element. Pick the line that's going across. Now pick the side that you want to keep. In this case, pick the lower half of this line. Notice instead of bringing it to a corner, it brought the line down so that it's now even with this line going straight across. Hit Escape on the keyboard to get out of the command. Now the real location that we need these two lines to go to are straight up so that they're level with this line going across up here. We've been using this line as an example for how these commands work up to this stage. So let's select on this line. Now hit delete to get rid of the line because we no longer need it. Now select on either one of those two lines that are going straight up and select on the third option, which is Trim Extend Multiple Elements. Pick the face of this object going across, move your cursor down, select near the endpoint of one of these lines, then select near the endpoint of the other line. And we can see that it's brought both of those lines now straight up. If we hit Escape a couple of times on the keyboard, we can now see that those lines have now been brought up to their correct locations. The offset command is used to make copies of objects a specific distance away from its original object. Zoom in to the top of these details by moving the cursor up toward the top of the view, clicking in the view, then spinning the wheel on your mouse. We need to make offsets of this dashed line here in the right-hand view so that they're the same offset distances as the dimension that we see up here in the left-hand view. To do this, begin by selecting on the dashed line, then move the cursor up to Offset. Click the circle next to Numerical on the options bar going across the top. Where the word offset is located, it currently has a dimension of 2 5/8 of an inch. Change that to be 7/16th inch. Now move your cursor over, highlight over the dashed line, and when you do, you'll see a dashed line either on the left-hand side or the right-hand side of that line. This is where that offset will take place. Make sure that the dashed line is on the right-hand side of the line. If it's on the left, just move your cursor a little bit over toward the right and it will flip over to the other side. Click when it's over on the right-hand side, and that will place that line. Hit Escape a couple of times on the keyboard to get out of the command. Select on the dashed line, and now let's change that line style from being hidden to a medium line. Then click out here in the space. Now we have the same condition as between the dashed line and this line. We now need to create another line 2 5/8 inch from the other line. So to do that, we'll select on our new solid line, come up here to Offset, make sure that the offset distance is set at 2 5/8, so 2 space 5/8 inch. Highlight where that line is located at, and you'll see the dashed line either on one side or the other. Make sure that dashed line is over toward the right, then click. Now we need another line that's 7/16th of an inch over from the one that we just made. Now we could do this numerically again, or the other option we have is graphically. If we choose graphical, we could then select on the line that we want to make a change to. We then have the option to copy it over from this point, click one more time on the line, over in this direction. Now we could just click whenever we saw 7/16, or with this dimension being up, we could then type in 7/16 of an inch, enter, and now we have that line in the correct location. The only thing that's left to change is to make that a dashed line. Select on the line, come up to the line style, and then change that to be a hidden line type. Zoom out, and now we have the correct spacing on each of these lines. The scale command can be used to adjust the overall size of certain objects in a Revit environment. It does not work on objects that already know their dimensions. An example of that would be, over on the right-hand side, select on the gypboard. Under Properties, you will see on the Type Selector list that this gypsum wallboard is 5/8 of an inch in thickness. Because it's 5/8 of an inch, and it knows that it should be 5/8, the scale command will not work on it. And we can see that with the object selected. If we look at the scale command on the ribbon, the scale command is currently grayed out. Whenever an object is grayed out, that means the scale command cannot adjust it. But if we would select on one of the lines that are here in the drawing, we could then make modifications of those. And this works with lines, arcs, circles, any of those kinds of objects. For this example, let's select the line at the top of our detail. We can see that the scale command is now active because it's just a line and we can scale it. Click on Scale. Now there's two different ways that we can scale this line. One is graphically, and the other is numerically. Graphically means that if you select one end of the line, then select the other end of the line, whatever the dimension shows up on screen, that will be the overall size of your line. So if I stretch this out to 10 inches, then clicked, we now have a 10-inch long line. If I did this command again, Scale command, picked one end of the line, pick the other end of the line, I could then pull this back. Maybe I only wanted this line to go to the very end of this line here. Well, I could just move this back to the end of the line, click, and now the line is exactly the length it needs to be to go from the first spot that I picked to the end of this line here. But perhaps instead of knowing the overall dimension and then using the scale command to make it either longer or shorter that way, maybe we need to scale by the percentage instead. We can do that as well, and we can do that with multiple items. To select multiple items, we have two different things that we could do. We can either click here in the drawing area and then do a window around these objects, letting go to select on multiple items, or, and I'm just going to click in space, I can select on one of the lines, hold down the Control key, then click on another one of the lines, and now we have 2 of the lines selected. From here, you'll notice that the Scale command is still available, and that's because these are both just regular lines. If we select on Scale, we can see that both of those objects are selected. Now let's change this to be numerical so that we can do a percentage. If this needs to be 25%, we can type in 0.25, click where the base point of this scale needs to be at, and now everything is scaled based off of the point that we selected there in the drawing, 25%. So there are 2 different ways that we can scale. Annotation objects allow for one annotation object to be placed on top of another annotation object. In the detail that we see here, over on the right-hand side, we can see that we have a break line up on top and a break line down below. Now, these break lines are actually hiding certain things already, such as the bottom half of this doorway. It may also be hiding some of the extra wall over here on the left-hand side. But the break line should really be hiding everything like we're seeing here on the detail on the left. And we can adjust that by selecting the draw order and adjusting those draw order properties. Start by selecting on the break line on the bottom. You'll notice that there's an option up here that says bring the front or send the back. Let's bring this break line to the front. So click where it has bring the front and bring the front. Click out here in the drawing area, and now we can see that everything that was on top of the break line is now behind it because we brought the break line up and to the front of the detail. Do the same thing with the line work that we see up here on the top. Select on the break line, then you can bring it to the front. If you select send the back instead, that would mean everything that's currently hidden behind the break line would now be sitting on top of it. That's not what we want to have, so we'll just select bring the front again. Click over here, and now we can see that everything that was behind that break line has now been hidden. We have some extra line work over to the side, so to get rid of that, we'll just select on that line work, and you can either click on one and hit delete, click on the other and hit delete, or you can click out here in space, window around those 2 lines, then select the delete key on the keyboard to get rid of it. And now that we have the detail the way that we like it reproduced, we can get rid of the other detail over on the left-hand side by clicking over here in space, holding the mouse button down, windowing around everything, then selecting the delete key on the keyboard to get rid of that extra detail.